Welcome back to the afternoon session of the Law and Crime Network. I'm Kenney Baden. Okay, so while the cross of this is going on, this is, as I said, this is Miss Christopherson. She is a friend of the decedent, Amy, who the defense has conceded was brutally murdered. So let's bring my guests back in. I'd like to start with Mike Korobonics, introduce you here in the studio. My New Jersey, Mike Korobonics. We met over federal court one day for the first time. And then, you know Gigi well. She's been here. Gigi Gonzalez has been here for the last hour. She's probably more caught up than I am right now. And then our own forensic science death investigator here at Law and Crime Network, Joe Scott Morgan. Joe, let me just ask you a few questions, Joseph, that I had on my mind since yesterday. Number one, You listened to the testimony about the investigation at the scene. Was it adequate enough to get a murder conviction, would be my first question. And my second question to you, Joe, is the injuries that were described to Amy's face, were the bruises, she's got bruises, and she's got some kind of scrapes and all, both on her nose and on her knuckles. Some places where she would have fallen, but other places on her cheek, her ear, where she wouldn't have fallen. What do they tell you? And then tell me about the scene investigation.
Okay, listen, first off, let's go to the scene. We're talking about, there was no medical legal authority at the scene that would have been able to compare and contrast, the injuries relative to this corn rake that's out there. And I want eyes on the scene that are an independent, objective, forensic investigation team, and that's going to come from the medical legal authority. We don't have that. All we have are two deputies that I'm sure that they're great guys, but that doesn't go to the quality of the investigation. I want somebody that's a representative from the ME to be able to come out there and talk about this. Also, this kind of idea of postmortem interval. How long had the decedent been down? There was no accurate measurement, nothing that I could really hang my hat on. So that's problematic for me, okay, because the ME is getting this information and kind of factoring it in without a scene visit. Now, as far as these injuries, one thing that was proposed was that she struck the ground on a gravel surface. Linda, when we hit on a gravel surface, we'll get these kind of tiny little lacerations that sometimes in car accidents, if you're impacted by glass, these are referred to as dicing injuries, and they're going to have little edges on them. There's no evidence of that. What you have are what appear to be consistent with like blunt force strikes. You've got these presentations on the face, the nose, these sorts of things. So this really doesn't hold water. At the end of the day, I want a medical legal authority that can testify to this in real time, what they saw at the scene, what they saw at the emergency room where she rolled into, and also what they saw at the morgue. And that kind of ties it up. And it's objective, Linda. Objectivity is the key to all of this, to paint this picture in a non-biased manner.
Boy, Joe, thank you so much, Joseph Scott Morgan. And we're going to have, when we come back, our attorneys talk about what Joseph Scott Morgan just said. But right now, we have to take a very quick break. Stay with us here at the Law and Crime Network. Okay, as you have it in most live trials, they're talking about documents between each side, and boy, do I love the fact they can sit down and answer questions. But let me just ask my guests this. Let me start with Mike Korobonics. Mike, there was an indication this morning that after the first affair, Amy really was an abused woman emotionally. Todd gave her a short leash, shall we say, with a big spike collar, shall we say. My words, not the prosecution's words. She had to have a list of approved friends, where she'd go. When she left, she had to have a time there and a time to get back. To me, this sounds like years of abuse. What does it sound like to you?
It sounds like a very strained relationship, and it appears that probably, I know they did get counseling afterward, but it does sound like he had a jealous streak, for lack of a better term, and the trust was gone in the relationship, and I think that really hurts the defense. Now, I don't know why they wouldn't try to keep that out, evidential.
You mean the defense?
Defense.
Yeah, I mean, that seemed to be pretty bad. Now, Gigi Gonzalez, Gigi, do you think that the defense didn't mind that this was being put in because they can say, I'm not scared of anything because the real killer is... Oh, wait a second. Who is the real killer, Gigi?
We have no, that's the question of the hour, and I think that the defense is hoping that they can spin this to make him seem more sympathetic. Look, listen, I didn't put her on a short leash because, I was a controlling person, but She was on a short leash because we were having marital issues, and that's part of rebuilding this trust. That's the way the defense should be spinning this.
Joe Scott Morgan, you've done a lot of these cases where you've had a spouse or a partner or a loved one. Remember, we're most at danger from people that love us or that we loved once upon a time. Yes, we are. Yep. Tell us, number one, why that is, and tell us what you would tell the cops or who you would tell the cops to investigate.
Hey, listen, Linda, I teach my students all the time in death investigation class at Jacksonville State that you're more at risk with the person that you're laying in bed with than you are in some kind of phantom down in a dark alley somewhere. That's a fiction of Hollywood. The reality is that most homicides are some kind of domestic driven event, and so you're in this environment where you're going to have crises. You're going to have conflicts. Who gains the most by this? Who wants you out of the way the most? Well, many times it's the people who appear to love us most, and I put air quotes on that. Sometimes these things become very, very violent. Out of my entire career, the most violent deaths that I ever worked, and I'm talking about organized crime hits even, were things that originated in homes because there's so much anger that's driven behind this, and some of that evidence is being held forth and being displayed in this court. And also, you have to frame it in the context of, well, do you have somebody who is very jealous, rage-filled, controlling, and you've got all of the elements here in the ingredients for a very violent outcome. So,
Joe, as we're looking at the corn rake right now on screen, let's go back in and listen to some of the text messages between Amy and her friends. Okay, so there's a sidebar going on. That's Carrie Cowan, as she was one of the victim's co-workers. I imagine the sidebar is going to be more of a scheduling sidebar, or to see how long the prosecution has left in their case that the judge wants. But we'll find out. But let me, Mike Korobonics, let me come back to you. You said these text messages are all coming in between the decedent and either her friends or co-workers or whatever. Why are they coming in? Why aren't they not hearsay?
I think they are hearsay, and I think I'm very surprised that this is such a civil criminal trial, in the fact that attorneys aren't objecting or things of that nature. I mean, hearsay by its essence is an out-of-court statement used for the truth of the matter asserted. Here, we don't have the person who's writing it subject to cross-examination. They're dead. I don't see it as an exception to the hearsay rule, and I don't know how it's coming in, even though the other person's saying, but, you know, I was part of this conversation.
So let me just stop you and ask you then. So when Amy said to the previous friend, it's tense, or even here to this worker, it's tense around here, still, okay? I think that was, it may have been the morning, I'll have to check my notes, right, that she died. The question is, who was she saying that about? Todd, the mother-in-law, whatever, correct?
That's the problem with these statements, and that's why I always like studying before I come here, because I feel like I'm back in law school when you get me, Professor Baden. But the bottom line is exactly that. I mean, here you have, when she says I had to do the light bulbs, the first thing I thought about cross-examination would be, first of all, I'd get out of my seat to cross-examine, as opposed to these attorneys. But did anybody check? Was there a cleaning of the light bulbs? Did that ever start? Was she just saying that because she didn't like her husband and she wanted to get sympathy from the person she was texting from? I mean, there's a lot of questions.
So that goes back to Joe Scott Morgan's claim that you have to have an investigator on the scene and you have to know what happens, and maybe you have to go back to the scene with a search warrant, right, Joseph?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to pick this thing apart with a fine-tooth comb. Listen, at the end of the day, you're talking about putting this guy on trial for his life. You want to make certain that you're armed with every bit of data, information that you possibly can have at your disposal, because you don't get a second chance at this, Linda. And this is, I don't know how many times I can say this, how many times it can be preached in classes over and over and over again. You do not get a second chance at this. It's once the bell's rung, it's rung. And so you have to cover everything in as micro detail as you possibly can. I want to know information. That's how we make decisions relative to our findings at autopsy and conclusions relative to the dynamics involved in the case.
Yeah, could we
and
put
this
that,
is very
Joe,
dynamic.
I just want to stop you a second, because maybe our producers, come on, could you put her hand, the right back on, and while we're all looking at this is, to me, a picture that I had not seen before. Now, you could have some bruising falling down, but I think I see, Joe, and then Gigi's going to comment, another bruise way back here on the left side, on the dorsal side of her hand, that wouldn't be from falling, would it, Joe?
No, because you're going to have a specific contact point, and that's kind of a it's a very dark contusion that she has there, and I want to know the age of these contusions or bruises, and their relationship. Are these defensive injuries? Is she striking out at somebody, or is somebody striking the back of her hand? These things have to be contextualized and married up to the reality from what you have at the scene,
so
and
Gigi,
also the life
go
that
ahead.
she's led.
Oh, I'm sorry,
and the life
Joe.
that she's led as well. Yeah.
Okay, so Gigi, you have this picture, and I see this picture here. She's wearing a ring on her right hand, right? And could it be, I mean, does this picture do anything to make it closer that it's her husband who killed her? Or could there be, for instance, he hired somebody, had somebody waiting in that tiny red barn because he knew she was going in to clean light bulbs as opposed to getting the dog container? I mean, does it tell you anything to get you closer to who did it?
You know what? It doesn't tell me anything, and that's what's frustrating here. Just as Joe said, we needed to have medical examiners in here dissecting this crime scene, checking her out, identifying bruises, making determinations as to what could have possibly caused these injuries, caused these bruises. I've got to be honest with you, when I see bruises on the back of the hands, I think defense. I think, was she hitting something? Because you don't get those types of marks from just falling down. And, unfortunately, we're not going to know that because there wasn't a proper medical examination.
And unfortunately for both sides, the jury is going to use their common sense and what they see at CIS shows, or they can watch us and we'll give them the real skinny here as to how you interpret this evidence. In the meantime, we have to take a quick break. Stay with us here on the Law&Crime Network.